Hey up everybody and welcome back. So now we're back to working here regularly. We'll see what we can't accomplish. But before I forget, I have to make a comment about comments. Now after the last video, when I look at YouTube and I sort of go on as a producer, if there's a new comment, I get a little red box in the top right hand corner with 1. If there's 3 comments, it says 3. And I click on that and I see the comments, and then I click on a comment and it goes to the video that the comment is on so that I can put a reply. So anyway, the other day I had a couple of comments, so when I looked, one of them was from someone, and I can't remember your name because I only saw it fleetingly, who mentioned that if I didn't win the auction for that centre stand, he had a Triumph one that I could have. So I thought, oh, very nice, let me reply. So I clicked on it, but when the video opened, the comment wasn't there. So later on, when I checked, I had 2 or 3 new comments, and when I clicked on them, sure enough, that comment was among them. So I went to the video and it wasn't there. So my apologies for that. That was very kind of you to offer. As it happens, I did win the auction, so I've got a centre stand coming. But just for future reference, if you don't get a reply to a comment, it might be because I can't find it. I've maybe seen it, but can't find it. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that straight away, otherwise I would have forgotten. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to start off just with a quick couple of minutes, and I'll show you the bit of welding and stuff that I couldn't do last time because I ran out of argon. Then, as I say, we're going to look at the wiring, and in particular where we're going to put the various components, because we have things like the solenoid for the starter motor and a couple of little electric boxes, you know, the rectifier thing and what have you. So let's get on with that. Now these bits are just tacked in for the moment. I'll do all the final welding when the frame's apart and I can lay it on its side so that I can get in easily. So anyway, there's the 2 steel pieces. I've left the bolt in because they're just tacked. And here you can see I've welded in the 2 sleeves so that this still moves. So what I'll do is put the centre stand on, move it so that the centre stand is where I want it to be, probably put a little mark on, and then flick the centre stand back, make sure it goes up far enough, and if need be adjust the position of this, and then when I'm happy I can weld this in on both sides and we're done. So there's that. Now here's a quick look at the wiring diagram just so you can see what it's like. Of course it's in black and white, which doesn't help, even though it has little letters on for the colours and a colour code thing down here, and over here there's the fuse box. But anyway, as you can see, it is quite complicated. And this is the wiring harness. Again, as you can see, there's lots of plugs on it. There's the fuse box. And no idea what that is. But this supposedly came off an XS 750, so everything should match up. Now we have the thing with one of the handlebar switches is definitely XS 750, one is XS 650, and I think the ignition switch might be. So 1 or 2 of these we might have to rewire. And as I mentioned, I'm going to shorten the ones on the handlebar switches and put new ones of these on the end so that it'll make it a lot easier to connect up. So what I'm going to do now is just fasten this loosely onto the frame and see if I can fathom out whether the wires go at the right places. Now I'm presuming, where are we? Where are we? Where are we? We saw it. I know I saw it. Ah, there it is. Fortunately, the headlamp. Oh, that Newcastle Brown from last week obviously didn't work. I'll have to have another one this week because I only drink one a week, you know. So we know that this end is the headlight. So let me get this loosely put on and then we'll start looking at it. Now, just with an initial look, I haven't actually checked colours of wires, but we've sort of got some good news and some bad news. First thing is, I can't believe how long all these wires are. You know, I mean, even things like the ignition, look, it's a mile long. The generator one, they're a mile long. So anyway, found 2 of the coils, but the third coil seems to be right down there. Red and white, which is coils. Red and white, red and white. So just had a look in the book again, and definitely all 3 coils were mounted under the tank, so I don't understand that. These matched up, colours match up, plugs match up, but I really, that I presume is the backlight, but it reaches, well, I don't remember my XS 850 being that much bigger than this. But I don't know what's the best way to go with this. Some of the I'm not putting indicators on, and it has things like redundant circuits for lights and things, or duplicate circuits, which I probably won't bother with. So I've got a nasty feeling that the only way I'm going to be able to do this is to take off the outer cover so that I've got all the wires loose, maybe start at the headlamp and just work my way backwards, finding stuff as I go along, and where necessary shortening wires. So next stage for me to do is to sit down with the wiring diagram so I can look at colours. I mean, the headlamp one is huge. I don't know, can you see that? It's, you know, you'd need a headlamp as big as a 5-gallon bucket to put those wires in. So I don't know where they go. Alright, so let me sit down and ponder, and we shall return. Now, I've been looking at the wiring diagram and looking at colours and things like that, and some of them matched and some of them didn't. On this thing, as I thought, is the flasher unit for the indicator, so we're not bothered about that. So I started looking at stuff, and as I showed you further up, some of the connectors matched up fine. But what I noticed was, this one is from the points, and it's got a grey, a yellow and an orange, and they're the 3 colours that go to the 3 separate ignition coils, so that's right. And blue here is from that there, which is the neutral switch, so that's all good. But then I could not find a 4-pin plug, but I did find, where is it, a 6-pin plug, yellow, grey, orange, light blue, and with a red and white and a black. So the Haynes type book I have has a supplement in the back for the later models, and the later models had electronic ignition, and that matches up. So what's happened here, I've just bought this used, I've got a wiring harness for a later model bike with electronic ignition, so although the bulk of the wiring is the same, 1 or 2 things are different. So one stupid thing I found was I couldn't understand why red and white seemed to be the power for the ignition coils, but on the book, when you looked at the ignition coils, it said brown. However, on the wiring diagram I tracked the brown black, and it just became red and white. How stupid is that? Anyway, my first thought was to get another wiring harness. So I went on eBay, because as I say, it was used, it wasn't that expensive. In fact, it wasn't expensive at all. But on eBay there was a couple of people selling a complete kit of these. I mentioned earlier that you can get these. So supposedly there's a complete set with 6, male and female, 6 connector, 4 connector, 2 connector, 3 connector. There's a whole bunch of the ordinary single wire ones, and it was $10 for a set. So I ordered 2 sets so that I had lots of connectors. So what I'm going to do is just strip off the outside here and then sort out only those circuits I want. So I started drawing out some individual circuits: ignition circuit, charge circuit, light circuit, etc. And then I'll tease out all the wires for those and put them together, and I can then cut those to length. I can fasten one end, and instead of the other end disappearing a mile away, I'll shorten it and put them. So we'll do that. I'll go backwards and forwards so as not to bore you as I find the various wires for the separate circuits. But what's also happened is this has arrived. So there's my centre stand, and I noticed, which one is it? I don't know if you can tell on the camera. That's exactly straight. That's got the least little bend on it, and it's about 1/8 of an inch too narrow in there. So I'm just going to heat this up. In fact, you can see it there. I think you can see it. I'm going to heat that up and move it out a little bit, and I've got to order the mounting pins, the mounting bolts and the spring, etc. But they're 7/16 UNF fine, and I happen to have a couple of them, so I can actually put it together and we can see that that works. So we'll do that as well. So let me start cutting this open, and as I say, I'll bring you back now and again to see the progress. Oh, one thing, this actually is the next morning from the last little bit. I must have spent 10 minutes yesterday afternoon looking for the ignition switch, clonking around eventually thinking, oh damn, what have I done with that? Have I got to buy another one? And of course it's mounted up there on the instrument plate, isn't it? So there you go. See, old age is a terrible thing, people. Right, you go and have a cup of tea or something, and I'll start cutting wires. So here's what it looks like with the outer stripped off. Now you can see most of it, the wiring is of course really good, and because I'm going to shorten a lot of this is the reason I decided to go this way. What I'll be cutting off is either redundant plugs or the ones that aren't quite the right ones. So I'm going to be working with this good wiring, and I do have all the right colours in there. As I said, they're slightly aligned differently, but they're good. So what I'm doing is I'm slowly doing each individual circuit. So when I've got my circuits worked out, I'm going to start, like for instance, we have the wires from here. This is the indicators, which I'm not going to put on. So brown and white, yellow and green, I can track these, and I'll just take those out. So the first thing I'm going to do is strip out everything I'm not going to use. Then I'll bundle up the separate circuits and tape them to the frame and so on, so that I know how long I need them. And then when all these plugs come, I can start cutting things off, putting the new plugs on. I'm probably going to do where, so here you see is the main fuse box. The heavy red one going in there and coming out here, that's main. And then the rest are, there's one for lights, one for ignition. See, and there's our red and white ignition wire. What's that one? Headlamp, signals, so we won't need that, and ignition. So I might just put one main fuse on the line, and that will do away with a lot of complication. The other thing I thought I'd show you is the alternator, because the alternator is not your little old Lucas one. there's the alternator. Right, and it's one of the types that's actually energized. So the alternator, there's the stator. The rotor actually goes inside and outside this inner coil. See, there's our generator coil, or windings I should say, with pickups there. Well, there's another coil. This center is also wrapped. So as I say, it's not just a good old 2-wire Lucas one. So, and that's got masses of wires. Masses of wires. So we'll simplify as much as we can on that and the ignition. And also inside here, some of these are cross-connected because again, let me see if I can do. Maybe I should get one of these little screens so that I can see what you're seeing. Can I see that? I can see that. So I must be able to. There it is, just. Anyway, this is coming from the handlebar switch on that side. And there are 4 wires there. But coming out of the handlebar switch, there are 5. So somewhere in here, actually further up you can feel a little stiff bit. There must be an interconnection. 2 of these wires are connected together. I've got a feeling it's the red and white and the brown. But I can do those with the tester, the continuity tester, and find out which is which. So okay, now you know what I'm up to. Let me start stripping out redundant wires and clipping together the wires I need for the various circuits. Now the more I look at this, the more I see not exactly redundancy, but an overcomplication. Now, all these wires, you see, as I say, that's from the. All that is dip switch and horn, basically, and yet it goes all the way back because everything comes to a central hub for the electrics. So here, for instance, I've sorted out the wires. And the ones in the blue are the ones I want. The ones here are either ones which are silly or are for the indicators. So here you see I've got pink and black for the horn push button. It's not a horn push like on the British bikes where you've got power going through the horn up to the button and then you just earth at the button to complete the circuit. Here it's actually going into the button and back out of the button to the horn. So that's sort of the thinking all the way along. Then this blue and yellow one is the power into the dip switch, and the green and yellow, the green one and the yellow one are the 2 filaments in the headlight bulb, main and low, high and dip. But instead of them just going, you know, instead of the blue and yellow here needing power, just going to the ignition switch, it runs all the way to the back to go into the fuse box. So there I've sorted out what I need. This is the ignition switch. Now this one goes to the right hand switch, and that's got the kill button on it and the engine start. And on the 750 it would have a switch to put the lights on and off, but the 650 switch which I had doesn't have that. Actually, they must all get their castings made the same because there's like a little piece that could have been milled out to put a switch in. But anyway, what I've sorted out, as I say, is all the wires. So this one, for instance, this is the one that has 4 wires here but 5 wires up at the switch. And this one is silly as well because the brown is power in and somewhere up in here it's spliced. So I've got 2 power ins going to that switch. When I put the kill button to run, the power in comes back down the red and white, which is right because red and white is my coils. So that's nice and obvious. The blue and white, when you press the start button, earths, and that blue and white goes to the solenoid. So that's completing the solenoid power circuit, so that's fine. So then I kept thinking to myself, what the hell is this blue and black for? So I took the switch apart again, and when the start button is a sprung button, so when you push it in, you make the connection on the blue and white to complete that circuit. But when it's in its resting position, that other brown is then connected to the blue and black. And the blue and black is the oil pressure switch. So the oil pressure switch is down on the engine. Why the hell didn't they just power it from down there instead of sending power all the way up to this and all the way back down to it? Who knows? Anyway, so that's that. This is the main switch, the actual ignition key. So because I didn't have an on-off light switch, I was just going to power the lights all the time, because you're supposed to have the headlight on here when you're riding. But then I found that there's two positions for the ignition key. Red here is white, red here is white, red here is live. So when you put the key to one position, this blue is live and these two aren't. When you go to the next, the blue is no longer live and these two are. So what I can do is make blue an ignition only circuit. If you go to the other position, I can have the brown here supplying ignition, and this red and yellow, which is right because on the fuse pad, red and yellow here is lights. Clonk. Now the only problem here, some of the more electrically literate of you might realise, is, wait a minute, as soon as I turn power on the blue, it's got to go to the kill switch, but this one's got to go to the kill switch as well for when I put the power on for ignition and lights. So it's going to feed back to the lights. So I've managed to find a nice little diode thing so that they can both only go in one direction. So that will solve that. So what I'm going to do is find somewhere up here, maybe a little closer, it might have to be under the seat, that's going to be where these connect. So I've got them all marked. I'll cut these to whatever length and put the new plugs I get on. So you have things like, see here we have 3 plugs for ignition. I've sorted them out. There's the 2 that actually came out the harness here, and these other 2 for some reason come out the harness right lower down. So that's the plan. I'm going to sort out the wires that I need and then just cut out the ones I don't need, and then route them, cut them to length and put those little plugs on. I think I mentioned that already, but anyway, that's going to be the plan. So I've got to uncouple these a little bit more and just track the wires I want. And what I've also got to do is put in the bottom of the motor so I can put the points cover on, so I know where these wires are going to go, and the alternator on the other side, and then I can route all the wires. But before I do that, I think I'm going to just put the centre stand on, so I'm happy with the centre stand. So let's look at that next. So I put a bit of wood under the back wheel, so I've got an 1.5 inches there, which is just nice. And we've got this bolted on. It's up against the stop. So we'll bring that down. That's how it's going to be, which is about a nice angle, I think. It's on the foot. So all I'm going to do now is I'll run a weld in there and a weld in there just to hold it. If you're wondering why I'm doing it now, it's because when I put the bottom half of the engine in to do the wiring, then I'm going to put the barrels on and the head on and do the exhaust. And I want to know where this is going to be for the run of the exhaust pipes. So, as I say, we're all set now to weld up, so let me weld it up and then I'll bring you back. I'm going to weld it on. I'll just put a little spring on to hold it. It's not the big strong one that goes on. So, it's up out the way. I can always, if I don't think it's high enough, I can always just ease the curve where it comes up so that it comes up a little bit further. And there it is. That That seems to work all right. So let's put the bottom half of the motor in and get back to this wiring. I've put the alternator on here, and on the other side I've put the points plate and everything, so I've got wires there. So these are the alternator wires, our power out, and these are for the field coil. And over here we've got the wires coming up from the points, so they all fit in nicely. I've also put the starter motor in, and there's a cover that goes on that, as you can see, and because there's a cutaway in the cover, that dictates where the wire that goes to the solenoid comes out. Hang on. There. So this is the wire that goes to the solenoid, and this is the solenoid, which has like a rubber casing that two tangs go into. So that's got to reach up to the terminal on the battery and reach that, which if I put it there is about good, and I think that would fit inside of the cover. We'll see, but we can have a look how things are going to go a little bit. There's our airbox, which goes up to there, and there's our battery, which goes there. Now I haven't completely decided on this battery for a couple of reasons. One is, although it fits in nicely, it's a bit narrow. This is the right one for the Yamaha. It's the 14L or whatever it is. But I can get one sort of the same amperage and everything, which is just the same width, but it's not as tall and it's longer. And I might prefer that one. I haven't decided yet. We shall have to see. Because one of the things I've just noticed is the way this battery goes on the Norton is this piece of sort of angle goes on there, like that, with a little rubber underneath it. And then this thing goes on there and goes down to a fastener here. So we'd have to make a fastener there. Now that puts the terminals this way around, and of course, as luck would have it, that makes this one the negative terminal, which I want to be earth, but of course we want to have the solenoid over here. That might reach over actually and go on that side, so we could do that. I don't know, I haven't decided yet. So anyway, they would all go in like that, and the other thing we have to find space for here is the voltage regulator rectifier unit, which is a box about yay big, so thick. So that will go nicely in there, and we can make a mounting plate fastened to this cross plate on the frame. So that will be good. The other thing about having a low battery was I'm still not completely convinced, even though of course I designed and built it, that this is going to flow enough air for the 3 carbs. I feel happy about the size of the airbox, the volume of it, but I'm not sure about that. Now, I had the boys round the other night, and Steam Shop Dave came up with a clever little idea. He suggested making the sort of roof of this like a roof, you know, at an angle, so that I could have 2 of these in, one at each side. Now I thought that was quite clever. But what I was also thinking was, if that goes on that way, if that wasn't there, I could cut the back of this out a little bit and then get a pancake type filter sandwiched between 2 plates and still mounted there, which could come back here and give me lots more actual filter area. Because I couldn't find, I wanted to put a K&N one on because they breathe so nicely, but I couldn't find one this dimension. So I'll have another look. So we'll hold that in abeyance for the moment. So I might buy a battery I might not. So where was I? Oh yeah, so we've got these various wires coming up here. So to a certain extent, until I get the actual voltage regulator and see how big it is and where it's going to go, and I get all those block connectors so I can do the wiring, I'm not exactly sure that I can go any further today. So I think for sure we're going to have an electrics part 2, but by then I'll have worked out where everything is and I'll have all the bits and pieces, so that'll won't be too boring. We'll be actually fitting the electrics, and if I've decided on the battery, I can put a battery on and we can actually check the lights and things and the starter and everything work. So let's call it that for today, and you'll just all go off and enjoy yourselves.